Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Novelists Unwind, and I'm Johnnie Alexander, joined today by Cindy Sproles, and very excited to have her with us. Cindy, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
We're really glad to have you. We're here today to talk about your latest novel, What Mama Left Behind. And I know you've got a copy to show us. Beautiful cover. Beautiful.
It is, isn't it? I was really tickled. And I have people say, is that you? No, but it maybe it looks like me. I don't know.
Yeah, kind of does. Kind of does. Beautiful, beautiful cover. So tell us about What Mama Left Behind and the story behind your story.
Well, excuse me. What Mama Left Behind is a story about a young girl in the mountains who starts an orphanage, and only by chance that she does that. The story behind this novel is that in the Appalachian Mountains in the 1800s and late 1800s, there was two things that went through: dysentery and influenza. And they could not, they didn't keep records like we keep records now. They were lucky to have a doctor that went through in the deep mountains back then. But they couldn't figure out why all of a sudden there were more adults dying than children. I mean, there were children that died, but for some reason, more adults were dying, and they couldn't quite, we don't have a reason for that. The only theory that we have today to look back on it is that, that old adage, children are better seen and not heard.
Yes.
When they had any kind of illness in the family, when they had childbirth, anything like that, children were kind of shunned away, go outside, you're underfoot. And so one of the theories is that kids probably were just not as exposed to influenza because they were kind of shunned out of the house. Kind of like our version of COVID-19. Social distancing. It worked back then. The other thing was dysentery, which, that happens in standing water where water grows stagnant, or animals, use the bathroom in the water or die and fall in the water. A lot of times the things that children were doing, the chores and stuff they were doing in the mountains were at the house or in the barn. They really weren't out in the back fields, out by the ponds. If they were anywhere, they were closer to the running water. So they didn't, where Dad might be out in the field by a pond, and that might be where he would drink water from. So those are kind of the only two theories that they have that we can kind of logically go on. But this story is based on the fact that there are all these children who all of a sudden were parentless, and a lot of them were just little tiny children.
Oh, wow.
So it's about a girl who her mother started kind of taking in these children and feeding them, and then she ends up, after her mother dies, following through and doing the same thing. And her biggest fear, her name is Worry Dresser, and her biggest fear is being an orphan, and so she ends up taking care of orphans.
Wow.
So that's what the story's based on. It's always fun to research it and then start to put the story together.
Well, I was going to ask you about your research, because I know that you live in East Tennessee, and you are, your roots are very, very deep. And
oh yeah.
So you didn't have to go far to do your research, but still,
no.
I believe I read that you interviewed people who either their grandparents or maybe them themselves were familiar with, well, those people still wouldn't be alive, but stories that have been passed down, I guess. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and maybe a couple stories that really stood out for you from the people that you talked to?
Well, my best reference was my own grandmother, who spent a lot of time, she's been gone for a long time now, but the stories that she told us growing up were things that just kind of stuck with me. And then, to be able to run across my dad's oldest sister. There were 4 children in my dad's family, and she was the oldest. When my dad's mother passed away, he was just like 3 or 4 years old.
Wow.
and his father passed away when he was an infant. So at 13, my dad's oldest sister raised the children.
Oh my goodness.
And so I had an opportunity to talk to her when she was in an assisted living a few years ago, and she gave me a lot of little stories like that that kind of hold on to. But then you run across older people in your church. I work for an in-home, an in-home non-medical company. We place caregivers in the home of the elderly. So I have an opportunity from time to time to talk to some of those older folks. And we had a man who was 102 years old that we actually got to help. I got to help take care of a few times. And so you pull those things from those people. And then, of course, like I said, we live right here in the mountains. So we're in Upper East Tennessee, which is the point of Tennessee. We're about 30 minutes from a North Carolina line, 13 minutes from Virginia, and about 40 minutes from Kentucky. So, we sit right in that little nice nestled in spot right in the mountains. So Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Smoky Mountains are all right here. The Blue Ridge Mountains hits into that Appalachian train. So, we just have lots of culture right in here, lots of things to be able to grab hold of and talk to people.
I love that. And I love those stories that you're able just to capture those, because they're going to be gone. I mean, that just that oral history is so important to.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that makes me sad about our kids in school today, because they're not learning these Appalachian stories, and they're not learning about the life of the Appalachian Mountains, which, was kind of part of our founding, part of our country.
Yeah.
And so it's the fun things that they're missing out on about how families really made apple butter, and those fun, because they were very innovative people. And up until I was, a sophomore in high school, my family, my mother's family, still all gather together once or twice a year to can beans, cream corn, and make apple butter. And all the brothers and sisters came in, and it was an all-day affair, and it was fun.
Oh, that's what a great childhood memory to hold. I mean, to have to be part of. That's really cool. That is really, really cool. Yeah. Well, and it's a beautiful area of the country. I have driven the Blue Ridge Parkway 3 different times with my mom, because it was one of her favorite. We grew up in Ohio, but her roots are in Southern Ohio, and she just loved driving along so we were just kind of in the foothills, no mountains, but in the foothills. She loved doing the Blue Ridge, and I took her on it a couple different times, and we just drove, not the whole thing, but a long portion of it, stopping at various places along the way. It's just beautiful up there.
It is. It is really a pretty place to be able to do it. The closest place we can get on the Appalachian or the Blue Ridge Parkway is Asheville, which is about an hour from us.
Oh yeah, we liked staying in Asheville. We usually would spend a day or two there, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. Well, that's so cool. I think you've talked about a lot of the things I want to talk about, except I also want to talk about the mountain grannies, because you mentioned those in some of the press material I was reading, and I thought that was really interesting. That phrase, mountain grannies.
The granny women.
Yeah, it was so cool. So what can you tell us about them?
Well, in the mountains, back in the day, they didn't have doctors that came through. Right. So, a lot of the older women, and a lot of things in the mountains were a little bit convoluted, because they were so secluded and way back. So they would have, and they were very uneducated. So they had a little bit of, handed down knowledge. They knew about roots and healing things from herbs and that kind of stuff. And then they kind of had, they had religion that was kind of pulled into that. And then they kind of had some of their own little black magic, that was kind of dropped in there. So it was kind of all squished together. But these granny women were the ones who basically they were the doctors of the mountains. So it didn't know, you wouldn't have any idea how you were going to be treated when you run across one, whether you're going to be treated with something normal or whether it was going to be some kind of magical thing. But the granny women were the ones who were the midwives. A lot of them were the midwives. They knew how to try to help people as best they could. Yeah. So that's what they were. Some of them were really good and some of them were just mean. Some of them were just mean. But and it just depended on their, on where their level of power was. If they felt like if they were real kind souls. I think for the most part, most of them were really sweet. But they were really kind, gentle women. In our family, we didn't have any granny women in our family, but I did have an aunt who I would have said that if really truly there were angels on earth, it would have been her. No. Because she was kind of that kind of person, and she was raised in Plains, Georgia. And but when she came up here and married my uncle, she kind of became the one in the entire family who was that person. If somebody was sick, she was there. If somebody needed help, she was one that was through the door. If there was a baby born, she was one that was there making sure that everybody had everything that needed to be done. She was the closest thing to what I would call a granny woman that we had, even though she wasn't, she wasn't a magic kind of thing. Sure. Yeah, but she just knew. She was just the one who took that kind of stuff on, and you never had to worry. Aunt Reba was always there if something happened.
Oh, that's
so
sweet.
Closest thing that I would say to that.
I just love the whole sense of community and family, and that even when you're in the mountains, and it had to be difficult, especially back then, to get from one place to another, and yet there was just this whole sense of being there when people needed help. And yeah, it was a very secluded life for the most part. I bet. But the one thing for sure was a lot of the mountain people pulled together. I mean, they really were, like you said, there was a good sense of community, even though they weren't very close to one another distance-wise. If it, for the life of me, rumors travel. So how they found out, from one thing to the next that something was going on, they did. But they were really good about, pulling together and trying to help one another. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's really, you're right. That is really interesting how it just seems like there's always a way to communicate.
My grandmother used to say, you can just whisper on the wind and it's gone. So somebody did. Whisper it on the wind and it goes all over the mountain.
It's everywhere. Wow. That's so cute. Well, in addition, now this isn't your first novel. This is what, your third or fourth novel set?
This is my third. Yeah, my third. This novel is with Baker Revell. The first two Appalachian novels were with Kriegel, and I've been blessed with both publishing companies. Have been just amazing to work with, and gone out of their way to kind of step into territory that they're not accustomed to stepping into territory on. So to give me an opportunity to do this. These books are written in first person, but they're also written in full dialect. And so, when you start to read it, if you're not from the mountains, you kind of, it takes you a couple of pages to get in. Now, it's not obscure language, but, we don't use ing on words. So it's just a matter of adjusting to hearing us say things, that you ain't used to hearing. So it takes you a couple of pages sometimes just to get into the flow of how the dialect rolls. And also I carried that dialect over into the narrative. So, and I did that because when I was giving out my first novel to some of my beta readers, they kept saying, is she not thinking in the same thing? And even the publisher had to go, that's right. So I went back and changed that in the first one and made it all completely true to the dialect of the mountains. So,
Oh, well, that's fascinating.
yeah, and I think it makes it more realistic, and I think it makes people feel more welcome and more a part of, of what they're reading.
Oh, that's really fascinating. So, how hard was that to actually write? I mean, I know you're used to probably to hearing that and talking that, but when you're actually writing it and having to maybe spell words differently and to get that sense across, was that difficult to do, or did it just sort of come naturally?
No, it just came naturally.
It just flowed.
I'm sad to say.
No, don't be embarrassed about that. I think that's great.
It is what it is. It's just how we are here.
Yeah.
So, no, it's just such a part of how I was raised that it was not a stretch for me at all. And in fact, when I teach at conferences, a lot of times the people harass me frequently about my accent, and I'm telling them they just need to learn how to talk. Obviously, I have the correct accent. So.
Obviously. Of course you do. Oh, I think that's just really cool. I really do. And I love books that are rooted in a sense of place, and yours obviously are. I mean, they are just set right there in so much of who you are and the heritage, and that's just so cool. It really is.
Yeah, I don't want people to forget.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just don't want them to forget about the culture of the Appalachian Mountains, because, like I said earlier, it's just such a rich culture, and people were so innovative and friendly. And I mean, they had their moments, but for the most part, you couldn't have asked, for a greater kind of people. And still, when you come to this area, I think most people that I've talked to recently say they always, when they walk away from this area, they always feel like they've been very welcomed in. And so that's just kind of the nature of this area. So I don't want people to forget about that. I want them to see how beautiful the mountains are.
Beautiful, yeah.
And at the same time, how hard life was in the mountains.
Oh yes, I can't even imagine. I mean, yeah. So you also write nonfiction. I know you've written a couple devotionals, maybe more than that. I'm so intrigued by the title of one, New Sheets. So can you tell us about that?
Yes, I can tell you about New Sheets. Well, how, I don't know if you do this or not, but I get a title in my head long before I get a story in my head, and I have to write it down because I think that'd make a great title for a book. But I unfortunately went through a divorce many years ago. My children were 2 and 3 years old when I went through the divorce, and I realized when I came back home that I couldn't sleep at night. Every time I laid down on my bed, it was like this. You couldn't go to sleep at night, and it finally occurred to me that when I rolled over and put my arm around my pillow and pulled it up close to my face, I could still smell Polo cologne.
Oh, wow.
Which was the cologne that my ex-husband wore all the time. And it's like, no wonder I can't go to sleep, because I'm still, senses do that to you.
Sure.
So I literally saved my nickels and quarters. And let me tell you, Walmart has got some pretty ugly looking sheets in the sale bin. But I saved enough money and bought a new set of sheets. And I took off the old ones and threw them away and said, this is starting over. I didn't even wash them because there was just something that was so nice about crawling in that nice, crisp set of new sheets. And that for me was kind of an opportunity to start over. And it became a family tradition at that point. Anytime my kids, anytime any of my boys went through some phase of their life, be it good or bad, we weathered it and got through it, and we bought new sheets.
I love that.
And we got rid of the old ones,
It's an interesting tradition. It's so unique. Wow.
So we bought new sheets and, started over. And it was funny because my children, we're a combined family. So we have 4 boys between us. And just so you know, both sets of boys are 15 months apart.
Oh, gosh.
Our two oldest boys are 6 months apart. Our two babies are 3 days apart.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was like having 2 sets of twins.
Wow.
So when all 4 boys were finally grown and out of the house, which my kids are 40 years old now, when they were out of the house, I looked at my husband and I said, you know what? It's time to buy. Time to buy. And he said, are you going to buy new sheets? And I went, no, this time we are buying a bedspread. After all these years, we're buying a bedspread. So we, it became a family tradition for us. And so when we went through those, graduating from elementary school to high school or middle school, we got new sheets. If we had a kid that went through a really rough period and they finally got through that period and came out on the other side, then we bought new sheets. And that didn't mean that you buy new sheets every week.
Sure.
You feel like you could, but we did as we weathered through those things.
That's amazing.
The biggest thing for us was to remember to get rid of the old ones. Because it kind of blows the tradition if you keep the old ones, because you can go back and remember.
Mm-hmm.
So we got rid of the old ones, but that's the premise behind new sheets. And now when I have friends that get married, new sheets went out of print last year.
Okay.
I still have several, and I'm working on getting it back up on Amazon myself. But I got the rights back to it last year, and so we're trying to work on getting it back up on there. But when I have friends and their kids get married or they go through a hard time, then I generally would give them a copy of the book and a set of new sheets.
Oh, that's sweet. Such a sweet story. I had no idea. Oh my goodness. I was just intrigued by the title. That is tremendous. I love it.
There's method behind the madness.
Yes, that's great. So what's next for you? What are you working on now? Writers are always working on a story.
Yeah. Well, I do have, my agent is now shopping a devotional for me. And I've never been one who has written in the traditional, so I have a devotional on prayer, about prayer, and it's what I call, how do I put this? It's what I call interactive imaginative prayer, because for me, I can get my head around the love of God a little bit better if I can put him in a pair of overalls and shoes. And so I have these imaginary conversations with him that really have helped me develop a better relationship with him through my prayers. And I allow him to answer me and talk to me. And it doesn't mean that every time he gives me my way. More times than not, I found when I do have those conversations, the things that are innately built into us, the rights and wrongs, the things we know that we should do, but we don't want to admit that we know that we should do, they kind of come back out. And so I think a lot of times God has worked through that to be able to discipline me as well. So it's not your average devotional. Yeah. And so it has to go its route and hopefully find somebody that'll step out and try something different and unique. But that's being shopped right now. It's called Meet God on the Mountain. Where else?
Exactly. Exactly.
And then I am working on a 5th novel. There's another one out there being shopped around right now, but I'm working on a 5th novel right now that's called This Is Where It Ends. And it's going to be about an elderly lady in the mountains and a friendship that she develops with a reporter from Lexington, Kentucky. So, and it'll still be set in the late 1800s. So it'll be fun, I think. I want her to be fun and humorous, and because my first novel was very heavy and very hard. The second novel was still hard, but not as heavy as the first one. And then this book, What Mama Left Behind, is still hard too, but not even as hard as the first 2. So I thought it's time to give my readers an opportunity to kind of laugh a little bit, but at the same time, I want them to see the seclusion.
Sure.
and how people like my grandmother was married when she was 14, and her dad still set up her marriage, so they were obedient. Things happened to them like that, and this I want this to be an opportunity for that kind of thing to come out, and to see that they still loved people despite their own things. So those are a couple of things I'm working on right now.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Show us what Mama Left Behind again. We want to see that lovely book one more time. Yes. And it's available when this recording comes out. It will be available, so you can get right on Amazon, get a copy.
You can pre-order it right now, and which it always amazes me because I have people putting pictures of it on Facebook, and I still didn't have a copy of it. Like I sent a copy or a note to the publisher and said, "My people are getting this book, and I haven't even got." And they laughed and said, "Well, yours will come in a box. Theirs is."
Yeah.
So I guess if you have a box, you have to wait a little bit longer than, if you're just getting a single. But yeah, finally this week, they came this week.
Oh,
and,
good.
So people had them a week and a half before I had them. So
that's great. But again, when this airs, it will be available. So you just be able to.
It actually releases June 2nd.
Yeah. Okay, one last question. When you're all done with writing and you've hit the end, what do you do to unwind?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I feel when I finish a novel, I feel kind of sad, because I feel like I don't know if this is how you are not, but you invest so much of yourself into it that I feel kind of sad. I feel like, oh no, my friends are gone now. So I kind of have to take a day or two and just not really do anything. Just kind of come back to reality. Come back to reality, kind of think around a little bit, get back in the swing of things. I think just being able to spend some quiet time. I like to sit outside by our pond in the swing, and just kind of used to not doing anything again for a while. Yeah. You have to refresh. You have to get.
You do. And I have been I've had one deadline after another recently. I mean, for the last 3 or 4 months, plus editings and just revisions and all kinds of things. And yesterday afternoon, it was after lunch. It was like, there is nothing I absolutely have to do today. I mean, it's like there's something wrong. There's and I worked on a puzzle, and I read, and I just sat. And then, I mean, I could have gotten started on the task that I'm going to be starting this afternoon, which is edits. But it's like, you know what? I can wait a day to do that, and it felt so good just to, just
just to kind of take a deep breath. I know, because I tell you, after our family has gone through, we've walked this cancer pathway with my husband, and which started in August of last year, and then went all the way through until February of this year, when he ended up at Vanderbilt and had to have his bladder removed. So we've walked this several months of that. And then in the midst of all that, doing edits for What Mama Left Behind, and trying to finish up the devotional, and you have so many different types of stresses on top of you that right now I'm kind of finding it hard to get going again. Yeah, because it was just, I feel like I was so sucked dry that I just kind of had to just take a couple of months, just to get my feet back under me, because it was not little things.
That's a hard thing to be walking through.
Life-threatening things. Thank goodness he's good now. Good. Right now we're cancer-free, but but that's a long, hard path to walk, and so it's kind of been the opposite for me. I thought when he was at Vanderbilt, because we knew we'd be there 7 to 14 days, and I thought, well, I'll probably get a lot of edits done while I'm sitting there in the hospital room. I got nothing.
No, it's those hospital waiting times are.
Head did not go that direction at all.
Yeah, I know that they must put something in the vent to make you sleepy, because I mean, I remember sitting there with my mom and could hardly keep my eyes open.
Yeah.
And you just feel that, like, that weight, that lethargy, you know. And it's like, I know they put something in the vents to keep people
sedated. Unwittingly sedated, yeah.
Keep everybody calm in here. Cindy, this has been great fun. Thank you for coming and sharing about your story and just the history and the culture and just how precious that is to you, and that you're sharing these stories, which just, like you said, they need to be told. They need to be remembered. This history.
And just for the record, they are all fiction. None of this happened to me.
Okay.
People actually ask, "Oh, I'm so." With the first novel, which was so hard, you know, people walking up to my husband saying, "I'm so sorry that happened to your wife," and he's like, "It's fiction. It wasn't real. It was fiction. She made it up."
No, it's just rooted in the place that did not really happen. Okay. Well, thanks a lot. This has been a lot of fun, and thanks everybody for watching. We really appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.